Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk with Mick Coyle.
Radio City Talk.
Delighted to be back after a quick break. Mental Health Monday from Radio City Talk, our weekly show where we talk about mental health and we catch up on 1,001 different wonderful services that operate right across this region that do fantastic work and make a huge difference to people's lives. Throughout this time, of course, we're having to do things a little bit differently. We're not doing face-to-face in the studio interviews, but instead we're having down-the-line conversations with some wonderful organisations that do some brilliant work. The guests on this week's show do some fantastic work in 1,001 different ways, and they're having to do things in 1,001 different ways as a result of the COVID outbreak. So we're going to speak today to the CEO of Listening Ear. Richard Brown is our guest on the programme. Richard, an absolute pleasure to get you on the programme. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, not a problem at all. I'll tell you what, Richard, can we talk about Listening Ear pre-COVID-19, because there's 1,001 different conversations to have about how things have had to change in recent weeks. You set out of Knowsley, where people may know you from. You've got your HQ there. What was the sort of founding idea behind Listening Ear?
Well, Listening Ear started about 25 plus years ago. There'd been a bereavement in the local community in Halewood, and at the time there wasn't really much support around people who've been bereaved. So the local church, the vicar there, wanted to do something to help some of the people who've been bereaved. So they asked for some volunteers and trained them in active listening. So that's where it got its name from, Listening Ear, to be fair. So the service was a listening service for people who've been bereaved. It soon developed into a counselling organisation. And in 2003, we got accredited by the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, BACP, which we've held ever since. So we're really pleased that we've held that for 17 years, and that gives a quality standard to all the counselling we deliver. And then about 15 years ago, there was something similar happened where a child found a family member who'd taken their own life in a barn. And again, there was no services for young people who'd been bereaved, particularly with a traumatic bereavement such as a suicide of a family member. So again, the local community rallied round and set up a children's service, and originally it was called Butterflies. For that, for people, children affected by bereavement, separation and loss. Both bits of the agency have developed quite significantly since then. So we're just awaiting our accreditation for the children's BACP. So that'll be an accredited children's counselling service. We also now offer occupational health work for the residents of, the staff who work for Knowsley Council, Liverpool Council and Sefton Council. We also run domestic abuse services for children across Merseyside. And about 5 years ago, we developed a suicide bereavement service called Amparo, and that actually works very widely across England. We cover about 11% of the population. So we cover all of Cheshire and Merseyside, including Liverpool now, which has come back on board, which is fantastic. So anyone in Cheshire, Merseyside who's been bereaved by a suicide can access our services. But we also offer it further afield in Lancashire and South Yorkshire and Suffolk. So yeah, we're quite pleased with that element of the service. So the counselling work we do, we probably see about 2,000 people come through the service a year. And then with the suicide work, it's moving further up past 1,000 every year. So we're getting quite busy at the moment, as things are.
Can I ask you, in terms of the sort of the accreditation and the qualifications that come with all of these services as well, but it strikes me from what you've said there, Richard, that it's actually born out of a community response, that there was a sense within a community that people might need an extra form of support. And that's obviously developed over the years, but it's still about that personal connection with people to say, hey, we're here with you, or we'll try and hold your hand as you go down through this terrible journey.
Yeah, I mean, all the services that we offer have come about to a need identified in the community. So, they're not just something we set up and think, oh, this would be a really good idea. It's actually people saying, I've been bereaved. How can I move forward? So, yeah, that was the roots of Listening Ear has always been in the community that it serves. And hopefully it still is. We don't want to lose that community linkage because we feel it's so important, because it identifies the people that need the support and that we want to work with.
And I think as well, the name itself, there's often stigma with this idea of reaching out for help, particularly emotional help. But if anything, we're almost built in that phrase of the listening ear. I'll be here for you if you need a listening ear, which I think is, I think that's maybe one of the ways that we still can justify ourselves in getting help sometimes. Oh, it's just a bit of a listening ear. It's a bit of a nonsense now, because of course we need to be more open about these things. But I think a listening ear is traditionally been a positive, a force for good within a community. It's a friend, it's a colleague, it's a loved one. It's somebody who cares for that person and is prepared to sit down and have that conversation with them.
Yeah, that's right. It can be a bit frustrating at times, because it's such a used phrase that people will say, "Oh, listening ear. Oh, sorry," it's as a kind of apology for what they've said, your brand, as it were. But yeah, it really does encapsulate what we do. So what we've tried also to do is to work with the different services that we have, and we sort of brand them all, so people don't just think of the service as listening ear. So, for example, the suicide bereavement service I mentioned to you is called Amparo, which is Spanish for shelter. The occupational mental health offer is called Vida, which is, again, Spanish for work. They're not all called Spanish words, by the way. The domestic abuse work we do is called Diamond, and the idea was it's a D and an A in Diamond, so it kind of spells out what it is. And then we have Butterflies, which is the children's bereavement and loss service. So it's important that people understand what the different bits of the organisation does.
And I guess when people do look for these services, they are referred through some way, shape or form as people going, oh, you might want to contact these, or if you let these people contact you, they might be able to help. How are you able to make those connections? How might somebody get in contact with an Amparo or Butterflies? How may they come to you and you be made aware of them?
We all our services take self-referrals anyway, so it's not all, you don't have to be referred by a GP or another health organisation. You can refer yourself in if you feel comfortable doing that. But with some of the services that we have to proactively look for the referrals. So Amparo is a really strong example of that, because people who've been bereaved by suicide are in a really tough place mentally, and quite often they'll say they'd like some support. We'll contact them, and then they'll say, "Who are you?" And because they don't recall asking for that support, so it's really important that we can proactively go and search for these referrals, because it's such an important service for people who've been bereaved. There's quite a lot of research done into that people who've been bereaved by suicide. And they're 5 times more likely to take their own life than anyone else. So they're the highest priority group. So that's why it's really important to go out to those individuals who are really quite isolated. With the other services we offer, we do have a lot of energy into driving the referrals, because that's how we're based on. That's one of the metrics for success, really. It's how many referrals are coming through the system. It's not the only one. Obviously, we have to demonstrate an impact, so we do a lot of impact assessments with the individuals that we work with, but it's about how many people are coming through our system and then being supported in a safe manner, and then being able to demonstrate improvements in their mental health at the end of the service. We find that for some of the young people, they'll come through the service, and then we'll close with them. But because they're young, they haven't fully developed their cognitive abilities, and will sometimes see a dip in their mental health. So we've devised something called the Emotional Youth Club for them. I'm really excited about the Emotional Youth Club, because it gives children the opportunity to say, well, I'm still feeling a bit low, I'll come back to you. And it's kind of like whatever a normal youth club would look like, but it's particularly to deal with young people's emotions. And it's great that they're coming in and engaging. I think that's really, really good. So rather than putting someone through a whole round more of therapy, so another 8 to 10 weeks, it's just drop in if you're feeling low, talk to some of the workers that we've got there, and then remember the stuff that we would have worked with them previously, and it's getting some fantastic results.
I'm certain that he would. I don't know about you, Richard. in this job and doing the job that I do, I speak to many people who've been, in this particular case, bereaved by suicide. And I think going into it, I thought I was having conversations first and foremost with people who were suffering with grief. And I've realised actually that although grief is a large part of it, the complex and emotional journey that those bereaved by suicide have been on strikes me as one of those most difficult journeys you could actually travel on, because it doesn't just come with the loss of a loved one, friend, partner, loved one, whoever. It comes with also questions and emotions that go off the scale and back onto the scale and onto a different scale as well, and then also fit into a sort of societal stigma as well. The journey that they go through is an incredible one, and it's quite right that the services that are out there that can be a listening ear, that can hold the hand of somebody through that journey, because we are not equipped to go through those range of emotions on our own, most of us. Because it's such a huge thing to deliver, to go through. And the fact you've got a service here that delivers assistance through that, I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I mean, we also find with the bereavement is quite significant trauma. Then that can be associated with the sudden death, because, I don't think many people would think my next of kin or my partner or my son are going to go and take their own life. So it really is a shock. It's a sudden death. It's a massive shock. And with the bereavement, it triggers the trauma. So it's really complex mental health that someone's going through when they've recently been bereaved by suicide. So the Amparo service we run isn't a counselling service, because people's emotions are far too raw at that time. And with BACP accreditation, the guidance is you shouldn't do bereavement counselling for 6 months from when the bereavement happened. And with a suicide bereavement, it's even more complex. So it's a support process, and it really is it's the listening ear again, just getting people to talk to us about how they're feeling, but also offering practical support to them as well. So, people, most people in the country won't ever have to go to an inquest, but the reality is with a suicide there'll be an inquest. So it's quite an emotional time, the inquest. It's a court case basically. They don't wear all the gowns and the robes, but it's still the same legal speak. It's still the same process as any court would be. So for someone who's been bereaved by suicide to then have to go through that is really emotional. So it's the practical support to help people through that and explaining what's going to happen. You have to explain to people that the coroner's officers are going to talk to you in legal speak again, but also talk about retained body samples, which isn't the nicest thing you want to hear when you're going through the grief process. But they can't not communicate in that manner, because that's the legal team, that's the legal processes they have to talk through. And again, that can be really upsetting for people. So it's how we can be an interface between kind of all that process that has to happen. So a funeral, an inquest, etc., from cancelling bills, reporting the death. There's so many things that need to be sorted out. So we're there to help them through that process.
And in terms of that, that almost that frontline need in that particular case, do you also have people who, and this isn't the right word, but I'll use it as an example, who almost graduate from the service, where you kind of go, okay, you've been through, you've had the sessions that you've needed, you've been with us for a certain amount of time, and now we stop the communication, unless presumably you have an open door in case they need to come back. But can you come out the other side? Do people then go, thank you for working through a diamond scheme or the butterfly scheme or the titanium scheme or the Amparo scheme? I don't need to see you again next week or the next month or whenever it would be.
Yeah, I mean, that's the efficacy of the service, is to get people to want to close and say, no, I can cope now, and I can move forward into other things. In terms of the Amparo service, that's a really challenging one to close a case off there, because the emotions will go up and down. So what we try and do is we refer people or signpost people into local peer support bereavement groups such as SOBs, that exist. They're a national organisation for survivors of bereavement by suicide. And so if there's a local SOBS, we encourage the person that we're working with to go to the SOBS. We don't really close a case until there's consent, to close. With some of the different ranges of kind of complexity. So with some of the standard, what standard is it one to consider, but with some of the more standard cases, that could be reasonably straightforward. And if there's an extension required of the set service period, then we need to have a clinical reason for that to go forward. Otherwise, what we'll be doing is we'll be just putting too much dependency in someone's life. So they have to understand that there's a closure to the service. So, but with Amparo, that will take over a year. But with some of the counselling work, it can be done in 3 sessions. Right. So whilst people are having different levels of complexity with their mental health support requirements, the length of time they'll work with us almost fits into the complexity.
And of course, in these different times in which we live now, of course, things have changed again. And Richard, you've obviously taken a decision with no longer able to make the face-to-face meetings, which I'm sure you found incredibly beneficial, moving to telephone counselling services, maybe a similar service to what we're on now with these sort of Zoom calls where you're face-to-face over a computer screen. How have you made it work since the end of March?
Well, what we did was when early March, we were seeing that we thought this is going to be a pretty more serious than possibly the government was saying, because the guidance was changing regularly. So at the beginning of March, we were still face-to-face counselling. All our work was still face-to-face, and we would advise our therapists to try and stay 2 meters apart, which is quite challenging. Try and wash your hands after every appointment, and that was kind of going okay. But on the 16th of March, we thought, no, this is gonna. What's the worst case scenario that we're going to go to? And we at the senior management team, we had a conversation, and we thought the worst case scenario is a lockdown, with everybody working from home and not really much movement, into work, etc. So we decided on the 16th of March to relocate all our work to work from home. So we were slightly ahead of some of the other organisations, which was quite good. It meant we could get equipment easier, because a week, 10 days later, you couldn't get a laptop anywhere, for example. But we managed to buy a load of laptops and some phones, and then relocate the whole organisation to work from home. And that was quite a challenge. It took us all a week to get all the policies, procedures, scheduling, everything. And it's a whole new way of working. So, we got that done in a week, which we were really proud of. For Amparo, for example, they were already working from home, the whole team. Because when we set the service up, it didn't seem much point in someone saying to someone, right, come from where you live, come into the office in Halewood, and then go back out to the community where you possibly live anyway, and work with the people out there. So from the word go, with Amparo, we had them working from home. So it was almost like there was no real change for the Amparo team, apart from they just had to do it all from over the phone. So we have trialed video conferencing calls, such as Zoom, in the Amparo service. And it's been getting quite good results. So we might look at how we can roll that out. We didn't offer that in the counselling side of stuff, because there's a lot more things around the counselling, particularly around the safety of the individual, and we didn't feel that the video conferencing platforms were appropriate at the time, or our experience and knowledge of using those platforms wasn't appropriate at the time. But hopefully, if the trials that we've been doing with the Amparo service are proving as successful as we initially think, we're hoping that we might be able to add video conferencing platforms for therapy, because a lot of the work of a counsellor is on body language. And obviously with the telephone, you're not going to have that those hints and clues that you can pick up on. So it is harder for telephone counselling. It's not impossible, but it's working okay at the moment, and we're getting a reasonable, say, 80% of people actually wanting that service. Some people are saying, oh, well, I'll wait until you go back to face-to-face, because I think they thought the lockdown would last 3 weeks. My personal opinion is I don't think it will I think it will be significantly longer. But that's just my personal opinion.
Do you think after COVID-19, after lockdown, that technology will play a greater role in organisations like yours and the work that you do, that maybe a text message service or a telephone service or a video conference might be something that doesn't replace a face-to-face conversation, but potentially supplements, an interaction that you might have between yourselves and an individual, or yourself and a family member, maybe? Yeah,
there's the potential for that to happen. Obviously, we'll be tracking how successful the telephone support and then possibly the video conferencing is moving forward. I don't know if we'll be able to get rid of it all completely. I'm not sure about that one. I mean, I think it would be there's something about the face-to-face interaction, and whether you can get that from Zoom or any other video conferencing platform. We would need to check, and if it does work and people want it, then by all means we can do it. One of the things I think would be really good is if the back office work that has to be done, all the meetings you have to go to, if that can be done via video conferencing, I think that would be a huge, huge positive, not just for listening here and for me, but for many people who have to travel all around the country to do a meeting. It's like you could travel for 3 hours for a half an hour meeting and then come back again. It's just a waste of time and resources. That if we can really embed video conferencing into the kind of back office side of stuff, I think that would be a massive positive.
In terms of the services that are operating at the moment, as we've been hearing, they're not operating in the normal way, but they're operating in a kind of new normal way. So because people are being bereaved all the time, and many things are still happening out there as well. Many people still have a need for these types of services. Can they still self-refer at the moment? Is that something that people can do today, listening to this now and thinking, well, maybe listening here can help me out for one or two different reasons? Yeah, I mean, if you go onto our website, there's a button you press for refer, and it gives you all the criteria for all the people who can refer into our service. So yeah, if you get the chance, have a look on the website, and then if you want to access our services, just refer yourself in, and we can process that a referral and get to see you as soon as possible. I almost think it's worth reminding people that although coronavirus, COVID-19, the outbreak, the lockdown, it seems so all-encompassing, doesn't it? It seems to be the one and only. But quite clearly, there are a lot of people with a lot of very complex things going on in their lives, not just related to coronavirus. And you mentioned, people bereaved by suicides, death of a loved one, young people dealing with bereavement as well. Coronavirus doesn't give a fig for those people, but actually those people might still need help. And they need to know that these services are here and they're here now. One of the concerns I have is about domestic abuse. If you're still with the perpetrator and you're in lockdown and you're in a flat, for example, I think the potential for domestic abuse is going to rise significantly. And it's those people that I'm really concerned about, because they can't get out of that environment. It's hard for them to access a service, because if they are going to access a service, it has to completely non-talking, because if the perpetrator's there and they hears them talking about it, then there's likelihood for more abuse in that way. So we're trying to develop a web platform which will help people who are living with the perpetrator at the same time and needing support. So things like that, I think, would be really interesting to develop and run out. No, absolutely. And I think people are having to find new ways of making things work in the strange times in which we live. If we can, we'll point people in the direction of the website first and foremost, Richard, so people can make contact. That's listening-ear.co.uk. That's listening-ear.co.uk. There's also a Twitter handle for this one, @_listening ear. That's @_listening ear. And there's also an email which you can find via the website. The website again, listening-ear.co.uk. Richard, thank you for your time today. An absolute pleasure to get you on the programme to hear about the varied work that you're doing, but the many, many different people that you help, many thousands of people who come through your doors each and every year. We look forward to hearing some more about what you're working on in the future and those different platforms as and when they change. Thanks for joining us on this week's Mental Health Monday. That website again, listening-ear.co.uk. We've got our news and sport next here at Radio City Talk. Don't forget, as ever, if you're looking for mental health services close to where you are, you can find many via the Hub of Hope. That's hubofhope.co.uk. That's hubofhope.co.uk. You can use the location on your device there to find local services to you. And again, listening here, wonderful guests on this week's show.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle
on Radio City Talk.